Just shortening up the shaft, which I needed probably 12 to 15 mil off. I was aiming for somewhere around about 12 to start with, and I had Erica spin the shaft for me while I put the disc grinder on with a thin wheel around this guy. Obviously was wearing a bit of a face protection for a change, save the bits in the eyes, and I was spinning it towards myself. So, but as you can see, just before we finished, we set fire to the rag, but I didn't want to put sparks all over the concrete. So anyway, got this tiny little bit left, and just doing a quick measure up. I reckon I got somewhere just over the 12 mil mark, so that looks pretty good. And just spin him around, and let's see. It's pretty square from what I can see. Okay, looks good. Okay, that last little bit come off quite easily. So just measuring what I've got here. So just turn it around as I go. And it looks like I've done a pretty decent job at keeping that square. Probably within a 1/10 of a millimetre. So that's good. I may not have to machine it after all. Okay, just measuring to see what the new length is. According to the spec sheet and what I measured previously, it was 2 inches. And the new measurement, 163 1/28, which is a fraction under 1.5 inches. 31/64. Inch and a half. And 63 1/28, so it's pretty close. I can machine that off because I've got to take this apart. What I plan on doing it is taking a little bit of material out of here, because I want to blow air in from this end and evacuate the air out the brush end rather than blowing. Originally they had a mechanical fan which sat on this end and blew the air through this way, but of course that blows the brush dust into the motor. And what I'm looking to do is blow them, so open this up here and blow the air forward and out that end. Now I've got the motor up and a couple of bolts in it, and I seem to have somewhere around about 1/8 of an inch gap, possibly a fraction over. Now I don't know if this overlapping lip actually goes all the way to the end. I'll have to take it back apart, measure this, and then obviously measure the outside lip on the motor and work out the difference between them and see what I should have. So I've got something about 3.5 millimeters there. So hopefully I don't have to do it too many times more, because I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, there we go. When this thing's got a fan on it down that end, which weighs next to nothing, this thing weighs 81 kilos. So it's not particularly light to be lugging around. Okay, I have it apart. Just measured this guy up. This is probably somewhere around about 2.8 millimeters, that little lip, and this lip is somewhere around about 4.2 millimeters. So give or take a little bit on both. So it looks like there's about 1.5 millimeters difference between them when they're flush, and I had about 3.5 millimeters. So it looks like I need to take about 2 millimeters off the end of the shaft, which is pretty close to the 15 millimeters. That's what I was originally looking at. And my disc is 1.22, so obviously going to be taking off a very small slither off that end of the shaft, and that should make Well, that should give me, it should butt it up to there, and then when I've got this guy off next, I'll just probably take a little bit off that end of the nut to give me the clearance I need, because obviously it's the shaft will be touching on this point, not on that point, and that'll be my clearance. Halfway through the job, and Erica's having a bit of trouble trying to turn the shaft, because whenever I apply any kind of load to the disc grinder, it's obviously making it hard for her to turn. But so far it's looking like that tiny little small sliver is working well. Avoid setting fire to the rag again. I used a bit of MDF this time in order to stop that happening. So here's our little sliver. How old are you? It's okay. Let's have a look. How do we look? That one that's focusing very well. But it looks like it's, at least it feels like it's pretty even, which is good. And just spin the shaft around, have a look, see how that looks. Can't see any wobble there, so that looks pretty good too. Just do a little bit of a measurement. A bit hard to measure one-handed. Okay, it's got 35.04 mil. Other side. $35.1. $34.95. $34.77. Clearly we weren't as accurate that time, but then that was to be expected. We had to stop several times. Although still not bad. It's still probably within 0.5 millimetre. But I may look at dressing that, because I may need to take it off in order to do this end. I've got to cut that end off, so I may actually put it on some blocks and chop it, since I've got to take the motor apart anyway. So we'll just see how that turns out. Just measure those guys again now that I've taken off that little bit of rag. Okay, so 35, which is pretty much what I had there before. I'm going to do some measurements. $35.04. $35.15. $34.99. $35.02, not too bad. Okay, I'll start with the Allen key, or the keyway I should say, and roughly 35.8 or thereabouts. that's showing. I don't know if I'm entirely square to the shaft, which is probably going to give me a little bit of a variation. 35.5. $35.6. Around that 35.8 again. Now I've got to measure around 35.7, so somewhere between probably 35.5 and about 35.7. So I've probably got 0.2 of a millimetre. Variation in it. Which one's all said 0.71. Anybody who can spot 0.2 of a millimetre with their high is doing pretty damn good. So yeah, roughly 2 or 3/10 of a millimetre. Okay, and that's all I needed to measure. Probably should take another measurement of this guy. See how much keyway I've got left. I may need to redo this. 16 3/4 mil left to the end, and I've got roughly the usable area. Well, it depends on the type of key I use. But to the flat, I've probably got about 14 mil. So that's what we're looking at. Right, thanks, Woody. Okay, just for curiosity, I'm going to measure this guy. Haven't taken any rough edges off. I think I'm probably catching some little bit of lip on some of these guys, but we're pretty close to a millimetre in terms of what came off, plus the width of the blade. So probably with the width of the blade is, I think it was about 1.3 millimetre the width of the blade, so it's probably taken about 2.5 millimetres off, so I probably should have a tiny bit of clearance now. I think the fit should be pretty good, so I'm just doing a little bit of a blue tack test to see how much crush I've got there, if any. Tiny bit of footage just to show what the final gap should look like. See if I can measure that. I can't really get it in there to measure. Guessing it looks like about the 1.5 mil. It probably should be somewhere there. So that probably looks about right. All the bolts are all tight, snug, so they should be firm up against that other face. Now it's time to pull it apart and have a look to see what the blue tack looks like. Looks like I cocked up on my measurements because that hasn't touched that guy there. So what I think has happened is this edge here, this inside edge, is very, very tight to this guy. And I think the last time I trial fit it, I obviously didn't have it all the way in, and I was thinking that it was touching on the end of the shaft when it really wasn't. Of course, the smart thing would have been to have put some of that on before I made the second cut. I mean, obviously I need to cut some off because it was way off, but plan B, time to measure across this face down to the bolt and do the same this way back to this face and see what difference I've got. Okay, measuring here on the motor end of things, I've got if I do it the right way around. Actually, see if that helps. Okay, I've got 36.5 millimeters from the end of the motor shaft back to this face. You just want to come around this way. Okay. And from a little razor blade again. I don't know why I didn't do this in the first place. Okay, so I've got 40 mil, so I've got about 3.5 millimeters difference between the end of this nut to the end of the shaft. Which means I fucked up. I didn't need to take that last probably 3 mil. I probably would have been spot on. I probably would have had 0.5 millimeter clearance or something like that before. What happened is I miscalculated because this tight edge, so this edge here, when they machine this they've made it a very, very tight fit, so that this edge was binding on here. So it isn't galling it, but it's so tight that when I pulled it up before, I thought it was tight, but I didn't really kind of lever on the bolts, so it didn't go all the way up. Had I done that, it probably would have gone all the way, but looks like I now have probably about 3.5 mil clearance to that. So what's that? Just over 1/8 of an inch clearance. So that's not, well, I guess I probably need to allow for a tiny bit for infloat on this, but not that much. Okay. Well, it looks like that's done. Just got to get this flanges made now. Thank you.